notes and trades those for U.S. Treasury bonds in exchange. The U.S. Treasury then has that $1 million of notes. If you look at your money, it actually says this is a note. What is a note? Like your mortgage, it's a debt. So what it then does is it takes all those Federal Reserve notes, deposits them in the U.S. Treasury checking system, which it then spends on running its system, or perhaps it spends it on a contract for planes or military. And that money then ends up at, say, a private commercial bank like J.P. Morgan or Bank of America or what have you. And once it ends up there, we use a system, as well as every other country that uses a centralized banking system, called fractional reserve lending. Whereas the deposit that is put into a commercial bank, the bank only needs to keep a reserve, or in the United States, 10% of that in the vault, and it can lend the other 90% out. And so what happens is the $1 million ends up at J.P. Morgan. J.P. Morgan makes a loan for $900,000, which gets deposited at Bank of America, or actually sometimes gets deposited right back at J.P. Morgan. But nonetheless, $900,000 is deposited at another bank, which then lends out $810,000, which lends out $720,000, $560,000, etc. This is what is known as the money multiplying effect. And effectively, if the Fed creates $1 million, our commercial or fractionalized reserve lending system will create another $9 million for a total money creation of $10 million. That's pretty amazing. But when you stop and you think about it, well, it's like, whoa, okay, $1 million creates $10 million. That's a lot of interest. How do you pay that interest? Where does that come from? And now is where we're going to start going off the traditional path of what you find in economics and studies, and where we're going to go into what I just call basic observation or critical review of how economics work. Well, one way that that interest is paid, and we saw that clearly in California's recent history, is that when the money comes due and it doesn't have the money to pay it, it just issues more debt, which causes inflation. But this is where I think through observation, I think actually it's paid in two capacities, one from issuing more debt, but the other from the profit that businesses produce from the goods and services that they make. For example, say you were to either get $1 million using your own money or borrow it doesn't matter, and you use that to apply labor to resources to, say, build a building. And the building, let's say, cost $1 million in terms of labor and resources, and the market prices that, for whatever reason, at a certain price, and let's say it's $1.5 million. So there's a $500,000 profit there that is created, really, right out of the air, and it's that creation, that profit, when it's realized, that can go back and pay the interest on the money system. So the banks have set up this monetary system that for use of it in our economy, that it facilitates trade and everything, we have to pay back interest. And the way we pay that interest back is through the creation of profit. So profit pays the interest. And I want to move on then to an economic rule that we have. And Equitable Wealth Management's #1 economic rule is, in order to create a profit, you have to apply labor to a resource. If you cannot apply labor to a resource or it can be consumed in its natural state, it is impossible to create a profit from it. The greatest example is the air we're breathing right now. All right? There was no labor applied to my consumption of it. So it's impossible for you to charge or create a profit on it. As soon as you add labor to any resource and alter its natural state for consumption, you can create a profit. And another thing that's a resource is time. That's where all the service industries are able to create a profit off the use of their time. So we pay the interest on DIG, the debt interest growth, the monetary system that we all use. Every country all over the planet uses this. And just to back up a little interesting fact that some countries have zero reserve requirements. Canada, Royal Bank of England, they don't have a reserve requirement. That's an interesting story how they do that. But in any event, we pay the use or the toll on this monetary system or the money use in our system, the interest, by applying labor to resources, which creates a profit, which thus pays the interest. So this kind of begs another observational question or something. In our economy, the zero-sum cycles that I mentioned earlier explains, as I was saying earlier, why do certain businesses or governments do things that seem contrary to the best interest of our economy or the management of resources. Take, for example, what I call planned obsolescence. When you see a certain product out there that is manufactured to an inferior degree, just so that it's either obsolete right away, or a new one or a new and improved version can be released, or it's produced with an inferior quality so that it needs to be replaced, you wonder why is this happening? We have the ability to make a product last. Well, the reason is because they need to maximize profit. We will do whatever it takes to maximize profit. And the reason that we need to maximize profit, or the reason that we need to constantly grow our economy, is because we're using DIG to, debt interest growth, to facilitate trade and make products and services. And DIG is perpetually growing. It's always growing. And remember, it's growing 10 times faster than what was originally issued because of all the interest out there that's accruing on that fractionalized reserve system. So we are under constant pressure to make incredible profit. That's why corporations are always under the gun to grow their earnings. It's not just to appreciate the stock price, it's to pay the toll on the overall monetary system that we use. So that is why you'll find what I call zero-sum economic cycles, whereas you're manufacturing below the quality and capacity that you can do, just so that you can inflate your profit, and you end up right back where you came again, because you could have, say, for example, in the refrigerator business, refrigerators were made 30, 40, 50 years ago that would last a lifetime. But as soon as you ran out of people to sell it to, and you are under pressure to keep growing your profit because you have to keep paying higher and higher interest on the whole monetary system, in order to sell a person 2 refrigerators in their lifetime, you either make it fashionable to have an outdoor kitchen, or you make the one break, or you put a warranty. You have to do things to inflate or grow your profit constantly, because the DIG system is constantly growing. So that's why we also see excessive complexity in tax law and finance. It creates an incredible windfall of profits to make things needlessly complex. We see it in health and food, pollution wars, etc., etc. If I had time, I'd explain and give you examples in all of these. But remember the economic rule earlier. The only way to make a profit is by the application of labor to resources. And labor trumps resources when you need to make a profit. Abraham Lincoln, I think, said it quite well here. He said labor is prior to and independent of capital. Capital is only the fruit of labor and could never have existed if labor had not first existed. Labor is the superior capital and deserves much higher consideration. And the reason that we're looking to constantly have full employment, other than the simple fact to be able to provide the good, what a person basically needs, is because we need to maximize profit again. And the way that you can maximize profit is by applying as much labor as possible towards the resources we have at hand. Because remember, DIG is constantly growing. So more labor applied simply equals more profit. And interestingly, this is something a little contrary to what most people think. Yes, we are losing a lot of jobs to exports and to new technologies, but we have actually done an amazing job of growth creation in this country. If you look, since we've been actually tracking unemployment since 1948, we've averaged 6% unemployment rate. But since that time, we've done some pretty amazing things, and I think job growth is very underreported. And the reason is because at that time, generally speaking, only men worked in our society. It wasn't that women didn't want to work or didn't have the ability, they certainly did. It just wasn't in our social system at that time. So since 1948, we've not only maintained a 6% unemployment rate, we've employed the other half at the same time. And not only that, we experienced the baby boomer growth, a tremendous increase in the number of jobs that we needed to fulfill. We did that. And on top of that, the population grew naturally, and we employed all those people. And on top of that, we employed everyone that's immigrated into this country since 1948. So obviously, if job growth hasn't been spectacular, to say really nothing less, if had it been static or only been growing at the population rate,